So one thing I think we can all relate to when it comes to horror fans is that we get asked the same question all the time. That is, why do you like horror? Why horror? Why do you like to put all these horrible images into your mind? Whatever. We meet these people all the fucking time. But having been asked that question so many times, and having been a fan of it for so long, you know, it does beg the question, why horror? Because imagine if you were obsessed with comedy. Now, some of you out there might love horror and actually still get scared by it. And that's awesome. I mean, if that's what you're there for and it's working for you, great. And, I think that those people might have a little more of, clear-cut answer on why they like it. They like the thrill of it, sure. But for those of you out there like myself, who never gets anything more than slightly nervous during certain sequences, what I was getting at was, imagine being obsessed with comedies and watching them all the time, but you never laughed. You never thought they were funny. Like, maybe you thought they were funny, but you never actually laughed out loud. You never actually felt like laughing. It's kind of how I feel about horror movies. I'm never scared. I never scream. I never really jump. I don't really get the thrill out of it. So why? What is the obsession with horror? And over the years of thinking about this question, I don't think there's a clear-cut answer. I mean, I'm not here to be like, this is it. I got the answer. That's that. I mean, everybody's different. Everybody goes to it for their own reasons. I've come up with multiple possibilities. Maybe all of them. Maybe none of them. For myself, and that's the only person I can really talk for here, and maybe this video will be good for you to share with friends and be like, hey, this guy talks about it. Like, this guy kind of gets to the root of it. I think originally for me, as a kid, because I've definitely noticed there's a couple things that we seem to have in common as horror fans. Not all of us, of course. There's exceptions to every rule. But for the most part, when I talk to horror fans, there's a couple key things that I feel like we kind of all have in common. Number one, we got into it at a very young age. Very few hardcore horror fans got into it later in life. They exist, of course, as I said. Exceptions to the rules, always. But for the most part, if you talk to hardcore horror fans, the majority of them are very young. Like when they got into it. Like, usually somewhere between like 4 and 9. Somewhere in that area. Some babysitter, something, some baby, their parents weren't home, they snuck into the room, whatever, what have you. Everybody has their story. And so, you're very impressionable at that age, and a lot of people did watch it at that age, and they just didn't gravitate towards it at all. But something in us gravitates towards it. Something in us is appealing. The genre is appealing to us at that age. And I've always found this fascinating because, as I said, one thing we seem to have in common is the youth in which we found the genre and fell in love with it. And another thing that I've noticed, and this probably wouldn't surprise people who aren't, and they'll blame it on horror, and maybe it is, I don't know. But another thing that I've noticed in common with a lot of horror fans is that they have anxiety. Is they suffer from some pretty severe anxiety disorders. Now, as I said, I think a lot of people would want to point to it and be like, well, yeah, because you watch death all day. I'm not sure that's it. I'm not going to say it isn't. But for myself, I don't honestly think that's where it stemmed from. I know where my anxiety comes from. So I can pretty much outright say I know it's not from horror. But what makes me like horror? So when I was a kid, I felt like I lacked power. My household was very dominating over me. And I genuinely felt weak. I felt like I had no say in anything. I had no strength. I had no control. And horror always made me feel strong. Like I watched these horror villains who seemed to have this unstoppable force in them. That it didn't matter who came at them, it didn't matter who was around, it didn't matter what situation it was in. These guys were relentless. They took control. I didn't admire their actions, I admired their strength. And that was one thing that had appealed to me as a kid, for sure. I think another thing is that I have a very strong fear of death. I am mortified of my demise. And I feel like, watching death and horror all the time is somehow almost cathartic to me. Like, watching all of it takes away a little bit of my fear of it. Makes me feel like I have some control. That it's all going to end anyway. But I don't know, being close to it like that, it seems to have a positive effect on me, or so I think. So there's something to be said for that. It's almost like facing your fears. Like I don't like that I'm so afraid of death. So I constantly surround myself, by it, so that I can try to overcome it by facing it all the time. Because you can only face your own death once, right? But on film, I don't know, I feel, and of course there's that fight for survival, which is what my life kind of always feels like at times when I'm combating my anxiety. Also, there's another thing, and I have so many different versions of why I think horror speaks to us. Now, I don't know if this applies to women as much. I'm not trying to be sexist or anything, but, and this could be for women too, I don't know. But I do think that there is inherent things in us, in our DNA, from, our ancestors past. And I do think that men, especially, were constantly in war. We were constantly in battle. We were constantly fucking killing each other. We were always dealing with, hunter-gatherer type shit, going out, killing. And we don't really have that anymore. I mean, thank God. Trust me, I don't want any of that stuff. But I do think there is that, killer instinct inside humans. And for some of us, we have that outlet. We have, I think everybody finds that thing that takes off the edge. Like when you get cut off in traffic and your just instincts are just like, I'm gonna fucking kill this person. Like you freak out your brain. It's very hardwired into your DNA. And some people use meditation. Some people use, boxing, fighting. They get out that aggression, let it loose. And I think that horror for me really is able to alleviate some of that angst, some of that anger, some of that killer instinct that's bred into my DNA, from thousands of years of bashing each other over the heads with fucking, clubs and gladiator games. I mean, we've had death all around us forever and ever and ever. And it wasn't until pretty recently. I mean, the Wild West was not that long ago. And you had World War II and World War I, and you had the Vietnam, and you had all these fucking things. And of course, we still have stuff going on today, but nothing like it once was. We are in a very, very safe time. And, we don't, especially where I live, in the United States, we don't deal with a ton of adversity, like where people are getting shot in the streets, or there's death all around us. We're having to fight for food, stuff like that. I mean, during this quarantine, there's a little bit of that, but nothing like it once was. And I don't know. That's for some reason that's always felt like there's some truth to that. Because I do. I mean, I'm not going to fucking lie, man. I have a temper, man. I am an angry person at times. Very, very quick to snap. I hate that side of me. And there's such an aggression inside of me. There's such an anger that's built up inside of me about what happened to me as a kid and what happened to me in my life and this and that. And I think everybody finds that outlet. And the people who don't find that outlet let life kind of consume them, and they just become filled with anger and rage, and they just can't, hold it back. But I have a bad day, whatever. I come home and I watch. Yes, I don't want to murder anybody, but there is a catharsis in coming home and watching someone take a chainsaw to somebody, to watching somebody fucking, take a machete to somebody. There is something about that it does. It takes the edge off a little bit. It quenches that bloodlust, I guess, so to speak. Maybe this is speaking to some of you. Maybe some of you are like, whoa, that's what is this guy talking about? Maybe the guys are agreeing, and some of the girls are like, what? I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want to kill anybody. So I'm not saying that. Just saying I do have some rage inside of me. And I work out plenty, and such like that, but it's not enough. It's just not enough. And there's also kind of an addictive quality to it. I think we all have an addiction of sorts. And mine used to be one thing, then it was another. I've always loved film. But anytime I kind of get rid of one addiction from the past, whether it was drinking or whatever, never drugs, thank God, but I guess some people consider alcohol a drug. But yes, I was very into drinking at one time. But like when I got rid of that, my obsession with film became so much stronger. I have an inability to just go into something and be casual with it. That's just not me. I have to go into it full edge. Like if I find out there's this movie and I'm like, oh, I want to watch that. And then I find out there's like 7 sequels or 10 spinoffs or whatever. I'm like, oh shit, man. Like I got to watch them all or none at all. I can't, I'm either going all in or not, That's why sci-fi and all that stuff is so bad for me, because I can't, I get into it and there's 80 seasons and fucking books and everything, and I'm like, oh, as soon as I find the show, I'm like, I gotta get into this, and I want everything. I'm kind of like that with horror too. I'm not kind of like that with horror. I am like that with horror. But I am curious. So, I threw out a few random ideas here. I'll be curious on what you guys think, because I know you've been asked this question 1,000 times. Why horror? What is it? What drives you to this? And of course, people are always like, oh no, I can't watch it. And they always say, you don't understand. My imagination is just so crazy. This and that. I always take that kind of negatively. I always feel like they're saying I have no imagination. Oh, your brain must be so simple, because you can watch these things and you're fine. But I'm so creatively crazy up here that I'm just going to think about it all night and it's going to fuck with me. They always say that though. Anyway, but I'm just very curious. I thought this would be a fun little video to make. Been thinking about it for the last however long now. And yeah, I'm curious on what you guys think. Why horror? What got you into it? So let's see that. Let's talk in the comments, what age? Let's say age first. I was however old, and the reason I like it, the reason I think I like it, what got me into it was that I liked blank, that I felt blank, whatever. I want to know. Let's see what the common thread is. And do you have anxiety? Did you start at a young age? Did you have anxiety? Do you suffer from an anxiety disorder? Do you feel like anxiety dominates and has a horrible effect on your life? I'll be curious. So let me know. We'll talk in the comments. I always try to get to all of them. Sometimes there's a lot, and I only can do so much, but I really will make sure I focus on this one. So let me know what you guys think. And, as I said, you can use this video. I don't know if it's very informative, but we're not lunatics. We're not. I'll say another thing. One last thing before I go. Another super common thing, exceptions to every rule, of course. one super common thing that I've noticed is that all the horror fans that I know, like hardcore horror fans that watch gruesome, bloody violence all night, every night, fucking just eat it up, gore hounds, what have you. They are the most passive, like, non-violent, have no, like, hate violence, like anti-war, anti-death. They want nothing to do with, like, real death footage, nothing like that. Like, death murderers to us are not cool. Now, there are some people that they get into horror movies and they think serial killers are cool and shit, and they like wear their shirts and promote them and whatnot. I don't get those people personally. I don't think there's anything cool about murder. But I have noticed that for the most part, almost every horror fan that I know is super, like, you know, against violence. And they're not violent people, and they want nothing to do with violence of any sort. So that's another interesting thing. It's almost like, as I said, it's almost like it takes that murderous edge off of us, like that some people might have. But anyways, I've rambled enough. Let me know. What do you think? Adios.